Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to have a great conversation with some wonderful panelists who I'll have introduce themselves in just a minute. But really, we want to talk about the role that digital communities and other student success initiatives can play in helping our college students be more successful and find their path throughout their education journey. So really dynamic group of panelists today. We also would love to know, well, I don't know. I skipped some, I'm a little out of it because it started snowing in Denver today. So I'm been a busy week. So we are going to record this session. So we will send that recording after the webinar. We also would love to include you in the conversation. So if you have questions, comments, anything along the way, please pop them in the chat. My colleague, Ana Hernandez, is here today. She's going to be helping monitor the chat, kind of keep an eye on what's going on there. If you have attended our webinars in the past, you're probably wondering, where is Danielle? Because that is usually the role that she plays. Danielle has a little laryngitis today. So she is in the background, still there, helping out, but she's asked somebody else to jump in for her. So we hope you feel better soon, Danielle. And with that said, if you do post in the chat, it's going to default to just posting to the hosts and panelists. So ideal if you can change that to everybody, then we can all see your great chats. And while we are introducing ourselves, we would all love to know who we have in the audience. So please take a minute to just drop your name, where you're from, if it's snowing where you're living today, and what your role is at the institution. And with that, we'll do some round of introductions here. So I'm Katie Kapler. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Inscribes. We're hosting this conversation today. I'm really just your guide for the conversation. The stars of the show are my wonderful panelists. So I'm going to have each of you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role and the school that you're from. I know we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that in a minute. So I'll hand it over to you, Miko.
Hello, I'm Miko Nino. I'm Assistant Vice President for Adult and Online Education at Rhode Island College, where I also oversee the Bachelor of Professional Studies, and I'm also adjunct faculty. It's very nice to have you here.
Wonderful. All right, Jackie.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Allen. I'm the Director of Online Student Success at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. I've been at Pima since 2013 and work in the Pima Online area. And my team consists of college success coaches and student navigators. Thank you.
And thanks for being here, Jackie. And your colleague is here with you today also. Andre, tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andre Bernal. I am also from Pima Community College, based out of Tucson, Arizona. Previously worked with Jackie as a success coach, and now am a Strive Online grant manager for a grant we have. It's called Strive Online. So my team consists of, coordinators, some success coaches, and continuing to build as the grant expands. So thanks.
Awesome. And we're going to talk a little bit about that grant at certain points today. So I'm excited to do that as well. And Sunny.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sunny Rothstein. I am the Dean of Liberal Arts at Cerritos College. We're in Southern California. As Dean of Liberal Arts, I oversee Africana Studies, Comm Studies, English, ESL, Modern Languages, and Reading.
Wonderful. And Sunny let us know earlier that all internet has been out at her institution for 3 days. So she has put herself up on her cell phone, but if we lose her a little bit, she might have a connection that's just a little bit off today. But thank you so much for being here, Sunny. And based on where you all are and what I hear in the chat, I think we're the only people experiencing snow at the moment. Everyone else is like 72 and sunny. So
I was gonna say it was 58 this morning, which is chilly. So
yeah. All right. Well, enjoy your beautiful weather. So I'm just going to take 1 second in case you aren't familiar with Inscribes, just to kind of let you know who we are. And then that'll also make sense why we're hosting the topic that we are today. So Inscribe is a virtual community platform. We are designed to create highly flexible spaces for students to go when they need advice, when they want to ask a question, or when they just want to connect with another person. And our communities are really designed not only to connect students with the institution, but to facilitate higher levels of peer-to-peer conversation. We focus not exclusively, but we've built the platform and designed it particularly for non-traditional learners. So students who might be learning online or don't have, are very busy working and parenting, maybe are first in their family to go to school, essentially might need a little bit extra flexibility and support in figuring out how to navigate their higher ed experience and find their people during that process. And we really focus not only on student outcomes, which of course, retention and persistence are always core to what we do, but we think at the heart of that and why our platform is able to drive those positive outcomes is that it also really touches on two other important factors. One being student sense of belonging, whether they actually feel valued and welcomed and appreciated in the environment that they're at. We all know that the correlations between belonging and student success are very high. And then also some social capital, which you all might be familiar with. So we want to make sure that as students are going through school, not only are they getting the wonderful academic education that's being provided, but they're also building their network of peers and other resources who can support them through that journey and also as they transition into career. So we don't want anyone to miss out on that component of the education journey. And that's really what Inscribe communities are designed to do. So we care a lot about student connection, student success, and helping students connect with one another. And so to get us started here today, why don't we just talk a little bit about your student populations and maybe sort of what makes them unique. And since we have the Rhode Island logo first, Miko, why don't you tell us about your students first?
Absolutely. These are working adults that at some point of their lives, they went to college, but life happened and they could not continue. But they continue working though. They didn't go to college. They have some credit, but they just spend their time working, developing great careers. One day they realize, this is a barrier that I have right here. I cannot move any further. I cannot switch to another career. I'm stuck. Those are my students pretty much. They come back to college, they enroll in this program looking for a device, something that can help them remove that barrier and get ahead in their careers. Busy working adults, but still want a competitive program to make it big in their careers.
Awesome. So right in the sweet spot of those students I was just talking about. Very busy, lots going on, very driven, but still in need of that support. So Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about the students at Pima Community College?
Sure, yes, thank you. I feel our unique student population is really just how our college is unique. We have 5 campuses across Pima County, and so students try to navigate between those campuses, and that's where our online courses really support their full-time schedule. So we actually have over 60% of our students taking at least one online class. For the fully asynchronous group, a unique identifier that we found was that over half are 18 to 24 years old. So fresh into college as well.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. So people imagine more of the adult learner population, but you've got kids really coming out right out of high school or wherever they're coming and starting this journey, and often at a distance. So that's really awesome. Sunny, tell us a little bit about Cerritos and your students.
Sorry, I had to reach to unmute my phone again. I apologize if you keep seeing my arm coming to screen. Sure. So we have about, I'd say 70% of our students are like 20 and older. If you're familiar with the California community college system, we're putting a really strong push for that pipeline for graduating high school, coming straight to the community college, and then potentially transferring to a 4-year or going into the workforce. So we have about 28 to 30% of our students are 19 and under, sort of the more traditional post-high school students. We are 65% Hispano, Latino, Latinx. So we just got awarded a $3 million HSI grant, which we're really excited about. And we also have both, obviously a CTE focus as well as the transfer focus. Again, there's always that conversation about how do you sort of braid those two things and have it not be sort of these separate tracks that potentially students perceive themselves on, but do both. It's a yes and mentality. And we are in an interesting position because we're actually located right on the border of Orange County and LA County. So we actually pull from both areas. So we have about 23,000 students, approximate headcount. So we're pretty good size, and we have 180 different programs. We have all sorts of different awards and areas of study. So students can really do some exploration while they're here. But in general, we do see those returning students, sort of what we call the non-traditional students. But we're really trying to get folks on that pathway towards upward social mobility.
That's wonderful. Well, and I think as we sort of move into this first question, one thing that strikes me as you guys are talking about your student populations is some similarities, but a lot of diversity. Even within your individual institution, you're managing, there isn't a way to describe the student population as one thing, right? So you're juggling a lot of different motivations, backgrounds, pathways. Talk to, like, amongst that complexity and the students you're supporting, do you find that there is some difficulty in fostering connection and those things like sense of belonging? How has that manifest? So, Sunny, I'll start with you since you still have the mute button off.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, it's, the C word, COVID, that changed everything, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have as many students just physically on campus, right? So we were a predominantly in-person institution, as most California community colleges were, but then now come post-COVID, we're still 50 to 60% online in some areas. With the trades, they're more often coming back. So just not physically being on campus has created that sort of vacuum of connection. And so we have these conversations all the time about fostering that community and that belonging if our students were used to being on campus and now they no longer have to be or are expected to be. So that's kind of new for us because it's just in the last few years, as opposed to colleges where we know like online is their primary mode of instruction. So I'm actually kind of curious to talk to people and hear what others have to say, because it is something that's somewhat new for us, right? We're used to having 20,000 students just roaming around campus. And there are some days when you come here and I see, maybe 1,000 students are parking lot. It's easy to find parking, but and it's, on some days, in the afternoons, you hear this term like it's a ghost town. And this is not just unique to Cerritos College. This is up and down most of our colleges in our system. So it's just that idea of pivoting from in-person connections to now how do we create that if students aren't even setting foot on campus.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm sure other people on the call today have experienced something similar. And certainly we hear institutions talking about that a lot post-COVID. And similarly, I think the other thing that COVID did is it inspired institutions to create more online offerings in addition to their on-campus stuff. But the same problem kind of exists where they're like, all right, I want to do this online, but I know this element is missing. I'm not totally sure how to replace that for those learners. Andre, what would you add to that? Have you seen something similar at Pima? You guys have been online for a while, so maybe that experience was a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. And COVID also changed the way we were set up as well. We've always had more students attending in-person courses, and as COVID came around, we saw this huge jump. But what we noticed after COVID was the online enrollment continued to grow and expand. So it was like, man, they got a taste of it and they realized, wow, we really do like online learning. And what makes our community unique is I think it's about 90% of our online students are here in Arizona. So they're not kind of spread out throughout the different states in the country. So they're always taking, some sort of online courses, but also still doing it in person as well, or are used to those in-person services. So being a success coach back in 2020, when COVID first hit, we were embedded into strictly online courses. And again, it was brand new, but one thing that we noticed was a lot of students that we've had were so used to having those in-person connections and getting those in-person services. So when COVID came, it was like, well, this doesn't match what I was getting in person. And that's what you see a lot of that. Hey, I feel lost. I feel like my instructor is not present enough. I don't feel like I'm able to connect with students. So I got to see that firsthand being a success coach in the online courses. And, it was tough trying to navigate and figure out different ways that we can really get them to connect with an instructor or other students. And a lot of it was trial and error. As Jackie knows, we were really trying to figure out different ways, and this role as a success coach was new to the college. So we were trying to figure out, what can we do to connect with students, and what different strategies can we use. And a lot of it works, some of it didn't work, or a lot of it didn't. So we're still kind of expanding that coach role itself, and trying to figure out those ways. But yeah, it was still tough, but we've learned a lot of different ways to connect with students. I think a big one that we've seen is text messaging.
Oh yeah.
We were able to connect with students via text, and even the instructors, and it felt like that was getting better. But also with this new grant that we're going to talk about a little later, has a lot more initiatives that we're going to kind of hopefully close that gap and match that in-person services compared to online.
Yeah, I think I never want to say anything nice about COVID, but I do. We have other schools that we've worked with where they did say something similar, which is when their in-person students had to go online and they surveyed them, it was very clear how jarring that was to step away from the services and the high touch and the collaboration they were used to. Whereas the online students didn't, they were like, yeah, it's kind of business as usual. And they realized, oh my gosh, forever the online students have just sort of been accepting the fact that they don't get a lot of this stuff and they've just learned to deal with it. But really, it's a disservice that we haven't been providing it to them. So I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to maybe some of what online learners really would benefit from. I don't know if that was similar to what you were seeing, Nico. Your learners are obviously working and a little bit older. What did, and you don't have to talk about COVID specifically, but what have you been seeing in terms of challenges for that population?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that they're always busy. So that's going to be a challenge. They're always busy. And because they're always busy, they will only want to connect sometimes when it's very relevant to them. So you have to make it very appealing. You have to make it extremely appealing for them to have it as a priority. And I'm going to be talking about that in the next question, but there are some strategies. And one of the biggest things that I have done is networking. When you're selling these programs that are meant to connect, it has to pretty much represent the networking experience that traditional students have in college. Another challenge that I have is that even if they have the willingness to participate in these programs to connect, not everybody is available at the same time.
Yeah.
They don't have the same schedule. So you have to really be creative, and thank God for asynchronous technology. Nowadays, with a little creativity and these platforms, you have the ability to have that social presence, that connection. It's all about that design, and you have to rely a lot on asynchronous. And I will say those are the big challenges for us.
Yeah, well said. I often say this, and I'll say it again, that I think there was for a long time a misrepresentation that online and adult learners didn't want, need, or benefit from this type of collaboration opportunity, these types of opportunities for peer connection. And we see the exact opposite, but it's exactly what you said, Miko. You have to make these opportunities ones that are extremely relevant, highly flexible, adaptable to your schedule. Asynchronous is such a godsend in that area. And then it's really amazing to see what they'll do if you give them the pathway for it.
I agree.
Speaking of which, let's talk about some of the things that you guys have been doing or are planning to do in this area. Jackie, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what's on your, it sounds like you tried a few things during COVID, some worked, some didn't. And then what else is on your pathway?
Thank you. Yes. Back with COVID, I came on board and our college developed this role right before COVID. And so the VP really wanted more of a student affairs, student experience, online success component to Pima Online. And with that, immediately I started to ask students, how was their experience? We would do an institutional survey every 2 years. But with that, I also included focus groups, additional surveys. We would survey particular online courses. And the overall theme was really related to this belongingness and community. And so they would constantly say it feels somewhat isolating, as online can be, but we didn't have a good platform to say, how can we match our students with other students? You know, they were emailing basically with other students, and there wasn't a better platform for that. The grant that we received was very helpful in saying, here's our strategy. We know what's, you know, what students are looking for and need. How do we go about doing that? Because we don't have anything in place right now to make it happen. And so if that's okay, I'd like Andre to just share a little bit about the grant in those strategies, because really the grant was designed around that completely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie, for getting a little bit of background of how the grant came to be. So it is a Title V grant. We have it for, it's a 5-year grant, $3 million. So we have it over the next 5 years until about 2028. But a lot of those initiatives are tied to exactly what Jackie was talking about, what we received from students, the feedback that we got. So a couple of things, you know, the main stuff that we're really implementing over these next 5 years is definitely expanding coaching. So we're going to, you know, expand the coaching in more online courses, you know, focusing on our developmental courses and also our gateway courses, but also having a peer mentoring platform as well. Students can connect with other students, whether it's alumni, other peer mentor who are currently online, and really can help just kind of guide them through their educational path and be their support. And then lastly, a big one, you know, that sense of belonging that students were always talking about is you know, implementing a virtual community. So we are in the process of implementing Inscribe, and we're so excited to get that on board, because this is really going to help our students tie that sense of belonging in their courses and be able to connect with other students and you know, really have that sense of belonging, you know, become a theme in the online environment. So we are so excited to be partnering with Inscribe and just to get this rolling. We've been planning it out and we're so excited. So those are kind of the main things that we've been doing with the grant that I'll tie into what we've heard from students and, you know, what they want to see different in the online environment.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, first of all, congratulations on the grant. Amazing. And I like the way you describe that, because what you're really describing there is an ecosystem, right? It's the idea that there's one-on-one support with expert coaches, there's peer mentorship that also is probably more of a one-on-one, and then there's this many-to-many model, and they work together to create the right system for your learners so everyone can kind of find the thing that works best for them at the moment that they need it. So I'm also really excited to partner with you guys. I know next time we have you talk, we'll talk a little bit more about the implementation and some of the outcomes that you're seeing. Miko, what about you? What are some things that you've tried? I know you've always got some great strategies for the audience to take and think about.
Yeah, sure. So I always tell people you need to divide your strategies at 3 levels. You have the course level, you have the program level, and then you have the campus-wide level. So I always look at the different levels, and at the course level, I make sure first I give proper training to the faculty on how to build social presence. If you don't have the budget for a lot of technology, I always tell faculty, you have to make students at least once in the semester go through the pain of group work. Having to collaborate with somebody who lives in another state with a different schedule and having to come together to deliver something is one of the things that is going to teach you the most in college. So if anything, that's something that really is going to translate to the workplace. The students complain at the beginning and they hate it, but they learn to be self-directed and they learn how to make it happen regardless of the challenge. Within that, at the course level, I always tell the faculty that they have to offer a space that is not graded for them to share. I have mentioned in other panels the course cafe, which has become a really popular idea. I have in my online course a discussion board in which the students have a chance to ask questions, share tips, strategies, whatever they want. I go every now and then there just to monitor and make sure things are not going crazy, but they really have used that space. Another thing that I do is a digital debate at least once a semester, having that exchange, healthy exchange of ideas using the technology. It has to be asynchronous, obviously, because not everybody can be at the same time having this. But it's in that situation when you see the master of knowledge, when the students are in that digital debate and they feel at the end of the experience, they tell you in the evaluation that they really got to know the students. At the program level, I use opportunities to online every month host a career and networking evening in which the students come to the Zoom room. I have breakouts, I invite employers. And what I want with that experience in the program level, I want students to feel, number one, that they're networking, meeting people that in the future are going to be future employers or future colleagues. But I want the getaway to be, what am I going to do with this degree? I want to see a clear pathway. What's going to happen with my career once I'm done here? That's one of the biggest things that you can do for your students to motivate them. It's a retention tool, so to speak. And then if we move to the campus level, make sure you have after hours online event services. One of the most important services that you have to offer your students connecting with others is that career readiness, career success. They are going to be asking questions on how to advance in their careers. Mental health, very important. And another one, making sure your students know how to do time management. One thing, if you don't have the ability to do after hours, try to negotiate with staff members. I'm sure some staff members might be willing to leave work at 7 if the next day they can come at 11, something like that. And in that way, they benefit to do something personal, but you will have somebody covering after hours. So if in case that you don't have the ability to do that synchronously, we can start relying on AI. A well-trained chatbot have the ability to solve tech issues, questions about admissions, progress, and all of that. It's about finding the right chatbot and how you program it to give the best answers possible. And I can go on this for I have to let my other fellow.
So, but I love that, because we also think a lot about those different layers of community. Like, community isn't just at the institution level or the program level or the classroom level, it's all of the above. And you will find different uses and models of how students collaborate and communicate at these different levels, which is really cool. And 100% agree on the after hours. I know that's really hard to do. That's another reason sometimes that these peer communities can be helpful. It's not necessarily the voice of authority, but it's much more likely that a fellow student is up, in the middle of the night than maybe your faculty member or one of your advisors. So feeling out how to spread that out can be really helpful. I think we have a question in the chat.
We have some questions. Yeah,
I'm gonna have Sunny speak first, and then we'll jump into some of those questions if that's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's great.
Yeah, Sunny, talk to us a little bit about what's going on with at Cerritos.
Sure. So I love the idea of what Miko said about different levels and different layers, right? So if you think from like the macro, I'll go in the reverse direction just for difference, right? We have we have what's called the student first framework, and it's basically the motto, right? And I always think about, like, in the 60s, NASA's whole thing is like, if you ask anybody at NASA, what do you do? We're here to put a man on the moon, right? And it was anybody you asked. And that student first framework is, if you ask anybody, like, what drives our work, everybody knows that it's a student first framework, and our president references it all the time. So I think from the top level, students first. Yeah. And so that trickles then down into the planning. So I can talk about something very specific that we're doing, because we were just in a meeting about it. So one of the things we're trying to do is get our students to pass transfer level math and English in a year, because of all of the metrics, all of the research around that. And so we want to build a program that's beyond simply, okay, take a class, take a math class, take an English class over the summer. So we are trying to build that community, and we're thinking about, okay, how do we foster that? It will involve food, but we're trying to have like activities, like in tutoring, right? We're going to give them snacks. We're going to try to have them be contextualized classes, so that if they're in a certain area of study, their math and their English class will reflect that content, but so will the peers in the class with them. So they will have that community. So we're in the beginning phases of that. And then we have what are called learning and career pathways here, which is it sounds a little bit like that grant, where it's a group of individuals from both student services and academic affairs. So faculty, deans, discipline faculty, I should say, deans, counselors, student services, financial aid, like you have a team. So many of my areas are in the arts, humanities, communication. It's loosely based on majors, but with some of the pathway work and guided pathways, right, that we need bigger buckets that are a little more student friendly when it comes to language and how we present them to students. So we have meetings every other week. So there's space and for those programmatic conversations where we talk about sort of how we're doing outreach to these students. What are the events? We had a Halloween event where the dance, because that's part of our pathway, taught everybody the Wednesday Addams dance. So and it was on campus, and at first we're like, oh my God, is anybody gonna come? But even if it's just 20 students, that's 20 students who felt community and felt that. So it's worth it. I tried to get our VP to do it, but he wouldn't do it. So there are those kinds of things. And I think another institutional is just having the space and the place for those students, whether it's physical space. So we have, an LGBTQ center, we have a veteran center, having designated places that those students can own. And, as Miko mentioned, also a virtual space that students own. I think that's really important to create that sense of community.
Yeah. And I love that you use the word own, because that is something, and it's relevant to one of the questions I was asked that I know Anna's going to bring up in a second. In some cases, it is really critical that students feel the ownership over the space and the community. That's not always appropriate. If you're building a community around your math course, the faculty member is going to be very active and leading that. But having spaces where students really own it, we have found to be really valuable in terms of driving participation and a sense of the value, getting value out of it. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well. So thank you guys. That was a wonderful set of activities and suggestions. I'm sure people are frantically taking notes. Anna, tell us I think we have some questions coming from
there's a couple of questions. Yep. Directly related to that one is someone asked, what are some of the common challenges that you see students bringing to these peer-to-peer spaces, or actually any of the other spaces as well?
No. When students come to you, what are they most often struggling with? Anybody?
I think the relevance. I believe the relevance, they don't see the point. You have to know your audience. Somebody who is 19, 20, they have a different sense of connection and aspiration in those interactions than a working adult. So I always encourage to spend some time developing a rubric. I developed for this very institution an adult online friendly rubric. I went through the literature. I studied other universities to find what are the elements that are going to make your campus friendly for your population. It's like a checklist, and it's going to be your best friend through the design of these initiatives.
You have a checklist that you've made?
I do.
Can we share it out after the webinar with everyone?
I think so. Yeah, I don't see why not. It's for Rick, but I don't see the problem. Yeah, I'm happy to share. Yeah.
Somebody's gonna ask in the audience, so I asked for them. That's awesome. Yeah. So having understanding, what you're building and why, and creating, and relevance, I think comes up so often across so many aspects of higher ed these days. Sunny, you're off mute, and I don't know if that's because you wanted to talk or because
just real quick. The question was what are students sort of coming forward where the community is helping? I know honestly for us, it's very much around basic needs, housing insecurity, food insecurity. So and there's still sometimes stigma attached to reaching out and getting help. We have an amazing food pantry here. We have a place where you can come and get clothes. We can get or we can connect you with outside services. And so I feel like when, again, it comes from a space that students already own. So if you are experiencing food insecurity, but you're also connected with the Veterans Resource Center, it comes from there that you get connected to these other places. So it's like multiple layers of community. We've got you at Cerritos College, but just in case you don't feel that, there's these other little pockets of community that you can kind of, that's your on-ramp, and that's your entry into the larger institutional community. Because it can feel, like I said, you just walk into our Falcon's Nest and you don't know, am I allowed to just take the food, or what's the process, and it can feel uncomfortable. So if you have those other communities that are already built, that creates the connective tissue to sort of our broader institutional programs that are here for all of our students.
Yeah, that's so well said. And what you said touches on something we see often in our community spaces, which is that there's stigma tied to a lot of things that are anytime you're showing sort of a lack of confidence or a lack of knowledge or a lack of resource, that can feel very uncomfortable. And it kind of just takes one person to be vulnerable and open up about that, to sort of normalize it. And so when you have smaller spaces where people feel safe and they're able to do that, it has such an outsized impact on the rest of that group that's participating. So that's always wonderful to see. We see examples of people just saying things like, I haven't done math in 30 years and I'm not sure I can do this and I'm returning to school. And sort of another example of being willing to put yourself out there so that other people can see that and think, oh, I'm not the only one, and we can support each other through this. Would anyone else like to add to that? I know we have another couple of questions coming in.
I was actually just going to share something very similar to that. Although we haven't implemented a virtual community, from the students, we were hearing that they just are first generation students, right? They just want a safe place to ask a question that they feel may not be a good question, but it is. And being comfortable to ask and having someone, share an answer with them. So yeah.
Yes. And you will see it, and it is incredibly heartwarming to see the students supporting each other, through some of those challenges. So exciting. Anna, what else do we have?
Yeah, so the other questions are sort of related to not necessarily the student-driven communities, although potentially in some cases are student-driven spaces. But when you have online instructors engaging in communities, how do you keep those instructors engaged and interested in creating and maintaining online communities? And this person shared that they have a lot of lecturers who teach across multiple colleges.
Miko, I feel like this is one teed up for you.
Well, I always sell the idea that we have to be teaching 21st century skills. It's very hard to teach them, and they have to be embedded somehow in the curriculum. And one of the 21st century skills, one of the 4 C's, it's collaboration, especially collaboration in online spaces. So you can use your course as a mechanism for the students to practice that collaboration and to have an endorsement at the end of the course. I always tell people, imagine that you go to an interview and people ask, tell me about a moment when you had to collaborate. If you had a course in which you heavily had to do that collaboration online, asynchronous, you have a big testimony, a big piece of concrete evidence that endorses you for that. So I always tell faculty, if you want to help your students with career readiness to get those skills, start fostering communities, collaboration, teamwork. Come to me. I have some strategies for you. It's gonna happen. So. Yeah.
Does anyone else like to touch on the faculty piece? We do see in the communities that we build around classrooms, one of the things that we have found that motivates faculty is that community can save you a lot of time, which I think some faculty think is counterintuitive. But if you put up a space, much like Miko was describing, where students are sort of talking to each other, the other thing that happens is there are students ask questions and faculty answer them. And so rather than answering that question 30 separate times, they answer it once, and that information is available to all of their students, and they will save hours and hours in their week. So once they start using some of these spaces and they experience that can be it's very tactical, but it's very motivating. Awesome.
Could I share also?
Yes, please.
Okay. Another approach that we're thinking of as we implement these is that the coaches will be managing, because they're embedded in the courses. The coaches will be, the first person that will integrate and speak with the students in these virtual communities, and we're hoping that will help the instructors kind of come in and see that environment and see how helpful it is for the students, and like you said, minimize the multiple emails they may need to send. And so from that approach of just the coaches kind of initiating it, we're hoping to gain faculty support and engagement.
Very smart. You're modeling the behavior and the outcomes for them. And then that's awesome. Very smart move.
One more.
All right, Anna, let's do one more. And then
I was gonna say,
I don't want to run out of time.
Yep, I know Miko already answered one in the chat, so I'm just going to sort of leave that. It was related to faculty as well. So we've been chatting about that quite a bit. But there's another question, mentioned networking events at the program level. This question is really around, how do you get employers, or have you had success pulling employers into these spaces so that they are not only just networking with each other and folks and building that social capital within your institution, but maybe with potential futures of employers? Or any of you bringing folks like that into these spaces? And if so, how are you doing it?
Good question.
I tell them that that's a source of them to find potential employees. So I sell them the skill set and the curriculum that those students are learning. And you have to build a one-pager, just one-pager proposal telling them one of the skills that potentially they can bring not only to a particular organization, but also the industry and also the area where they are. You have to tell them there is something here for you as well.
Awesome. Did anyone else do much work with employers in these community spaces today?
So in California, it's actually required to have advisory boards for many of our CTE programs. So we are required to have meetings. Do they always happen? But I think it is, as Miko said, a way to say, like, these are your future employers. I was at the university area for a short period of time. And I said, look, what are the things that you wish a graduate from our college had, to make sure we know? Like, if you see that name, our institution name on a resume, what do you want to be confident, okay, this person can do X, Y, and Z? And I know that because I've had the conversation with the chairs and the faculty and all of the classified professionals. So I know they have it locked down that they're going to be able to do these things. And that assurance, I think, is what you get from having those advisory committees. So, sometimes it's just, working with your PR or even your faculty, just they cold call and they say, hey, we have graduates, we have companies come to us too. Look, anecdotally, I have a friend who has her own architecture firm. She's like, I really would love an intern. I would really in particular like to mentor a female architect, because I know what it's like to go through this business as a woman, and have it sometimes be challenging. So I just forward that on. So sometimes it's just grassroots and homegrown, where you just say, hey, we have this business. My dentist loves to have students, and we have a dental hygiene program. So I think if you have that ethos of the college of, like, we're always have our eye out for opportunities for our students, we bring them in informally, and then, with formal structures like advisory boards.
Awesome. Wow, that's great. And that mix of formal and informal, I think, also really helps the students practice different skills as well, like networking, high stakes, low stakes. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move us on. These are great questions, and please keep them coming. Hopefully we'll have a little time at the end to do a few more. I know there was one other question in the chat, which I'm going to address just as we move into this, because I think it's relevant to this next question, which is, basically we put all of these great initiatives into place. How do we figure out if they're working? And are they working? And I will just say, so I think there was one question about how do you actually get students to participate in these spaces, or are there any challenges with participation? And I like that question, because for the most part, when we work with people, the aspirations are always tend to be around things like retention and persistence. But at the very bottom of that pyramid of outcomes is participation. If students aren't taking advantage of these things, you're never going to help move the needle in other areas. And so I will say, from our perspective, and I'm echoing a little bit what I think some of our panelists have already said, make sure the space is really flexible. Asynchronous is your friend. Make sure it's easy to access. Make sure the purpose of these spaces are very clear. Like, what is it that the student is going to get out of it? What are they for? Make sure that they're staffed with the appropriate people that can help answer questions. And then just make sure they know about it. A lot of times people will build these initiatives and these great, wonderful opportunities, and then students actually don't know that they exist. So some small, simple things that you can do. That was a very quick snapshot. If you want to go deeper on that topic, my team can go deep, very, very deep on that conversation. But I just want to make sure we didn't miss that question in the chat, because I think it's a really good one. But so if we talk about, we got to have people in there participating, what are some other ways that you guys are thinking about measuring the success, or have measured the success of some of these initiatives? Jackie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I can think of, related to the online success coaching, we originally started to look at course success. And because we were choosing courses that had a larger gap between the online and not online success rates. And so we were even drilling down to the different productive grade rates and ABCs. And we noticed, even though maybe some of the rates did not change, the amount of W's went up and the F's went down. And so those were conversations the coaches were having with students, and the student stories though were the most valuable. So hearing from our students that this coach helped me understand how to study for this course, or that I'm not inherently bad at math, I can actually do this if I take this approach. Those were the most valuable to that particular initiative. And then we're really looking at, okay, with that, what are the KPIs just really tied to coaching? Is it persistence? Is it that course success grade rate? Or is it also just a combination of all of that with the student stories as well? And then with the virtual communities, we would love to know like who is participating and really tracking and disaggregating the data to see if we're hitting our target population that we were thinking we may, our first gens are new to higher ed that we're hoping to help, move that along the way.
Yeah, wonderful. And one of the things I think you touched on there too is this idea that data is coming from multiple sources. So making sure that you can get the data you need to bring it together in a unique way, and also not losing sight of the qualitative data that you get. Those student stories are just so powerful. And even though they're one at a time, they really add up to something that can be so meaningful. So I love that you guys are looking into that. Sunny, what about you? What do you tend to think of when you think of what's working?
Okay, so you're gonna have to cut me off. So I got my start as a research analyst in community
Oh no,
colleges.
here we go.
So here we go. You should see
I'm
what I
setting a
have.
timer.
You should see what I have written for my notes. No, but I mean, so the biggest issue, right, is causality, right? We can't. How do we determine causality? And it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So I think what has helped us, especially when you're talking about metrics that are for us in community colleges, we used to have a 6-year timeline for our completion metrics. We're trying to bring it down because we're ostensibly a 2-year school. So I think one of the things is to really use things like logic models or have, short-term and long-term, you want to call them, indicators, predictors, although predictors is careful with that, right? But just like, okay, so what is the behavior that we see as indicative of that long-term success? So for us, it's things like transfer level math and English within 1 year, completing 15 units. If you're only doing 12 units or 5 units per semester and it's a 60-unit degree, you are going to be here for several years. So the 15 to finish type of campaigns, and I think also helping people understand that like causality, correlation is not causation, which I always say all the time, right? So yes, we're glad that we're seeing this happen, but let's not put all of our eggs in one basket and fund this program and throw all sorts of money at it if just because we saw one thing change. Let's take a more holistic view. And there are some things that you just sort of know in your gut, like students, if they're hungry, are not going to be able to focus as well in class. So we're going to give them food. And I don't need data to tell me that. I know that as a human being. So there are some things that I feel like are just basic, when you're coming to basic needs. I think it gets more challenging when you're talking about things like tutoring or other aspects things that we're putting money into. So I have I think it's the biggest challenge, right? We're talking about taxpayer dollars and how we're investing them and how do we show the proof of concept and then beyond. But I do think finding those intermediate metrics to measure success and that we're keeping students on the right path is how we're going to get there.
Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate the intuition piece because I think sometimes people lose sight of that. Common sense will also tell you a lot of times what will work, and then doesn't mean you don't need to measure the outcome of that, but trust your gut. Miko, what would you say?
Well, for me, the biggest metric is participation. I compare the number of participants per activity, per initiative, so I can tell which ones are more appealing. And also, I rely a lot on reflection. I partner with faculty members in key courses. So part of the assignment, depending on the assignment, is to reflect on certain components of the program. And those reflections are one of the most significant things that I have had. Those stories, that thought process in which they are not feeling that they have to tell me something that I want to hear, have really helped me really refine these initiatives. And I will say also data from the learning management system. Many of my asynchronous initiatives, they leave their house in a learning management system. So I'm always looking at the data, the analytics of the learning management system to see where they're spending the most time, where they're doing the clicks, all of that. That's telling for me as well.
So again, this combination of qualitative and quantitative data is really what's going to tell you that full story of what's going on. So that can take a little while to gather, but it will give you the insights. And when things aren't working too, that qualitative data can help you understand, well, do I throw the whole thing out, or was it just something about the implementation of the strategy that wasn't quite working right? You know, so you can be a little more nuanced in how you adjust and think about changes. So great examples from everybody. So normally we end the conversation with like a big vision question, but we're going to get very practical with our end question today, which is, I think a lot of times people want to do these great things, they have great ideas, and then budget or resource or something else is what ultimately gets in the way of their implementation. So I would love to know, and I think our audience would love to know, if you guys have found any creative ways to help fund some of these and scale some of these initiatives. Now, for the folks that got the grant, well, why don't we start with you, because that's a fantastic way to creatively fund something. If you guys want to talk a little bit more about the grant itself, I don't know if it's still available to other institutions or how you found it, but Jackie, are you going to take it away?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So the Title V grant was really, after all of the feedback we collected and all of that, I was searching around, okay, what could we do? How could we expand coaching? Some of these different platforms we don't have, it'll cost money in a budget. I went to our admin and really getting their buy-in to say, luckily, you know, Pima Online was a priority, and it was something that needed to improve upon because of our population changes and modality changes. And so with that, I was hesitant for the grant because I know that there's a lot of restrictions and you're not sure if the institutionalization afterwards will really occur. But we took the first stab at it in 2021, and actually was a point away from getting the grant.
Oh,
so
no.
when we received the grant, this was the second time we submitted it. I do have to say the second time it was much better than the first. So we're happy that it happened this way, but to keep with it and to keep searching. And I found pockets of people that really went above and beyond to say, yes, I'll help you with this. We need this. I could see that. And one thing our grant writer said was, you know, what you're asking for is very different than other grants, and you're kind of all over the place with what you're wanting to design. And I said, that's because we're finding those gaps and we're trying to fill in different areas within Pima Online. And the buy-in from administration was key with helping support us in that.
That's awesome. Well, good. I mean, again, congratulations, and good tenacity to stick with it. And this was a Strive grant, is that right? Is that what the grant itself was called, or?
It's actually a Title V grant through the Department of Ed. And so it's one of the larger grants, I believe. We have a grants office that helped us match what type of grant we should go for. And in the beginning, it was a Title III, but then for the second round, they said, no, let's look at the Title V, which was enhancing what we already had. And that was the focus of that grant.
And we've seen that there's still a lot of grant money out there focused in these areas of student success and support. So definitely worth looking there.
And it's an
Sunny,
HSI. It's an HSI grant. So that was also very helpful for us.
There you go. So also relevant for your institution, Sunny. What do you guys do to fund some of these?
Oh, literally the $1 million question, right? So I think, so I'll give you my personal approach, right? So I always think proof of concept is really important. So you find those pockets of people who are kind of willing to do that extra work that other folks might want to be compensated for. And I think of it like, okay, we have an immediate need for students right now. So we build whatever this small thing is that shows proof of concept as a way to push the institution to create whatever is the institution level need, right? So like OER, zero cost textbooks is a really good example. You have some faculty who are willing to do it without any additional compensation, while the institution and academic senate it, and others said, okay, this is going to be a requirement. 20% of our classes have to be DTC or whatever it is, right? I think so. That's one piece of it. So find those people who are willing to do the work as proof of concept to push the larger conversation for the institution. I think the other piece that we do is we try to use existing processes, existing work that's being done. So another good example of that is like for the summer program that we're trying to build, we're never going to get our own counselor hired. So what we'd like to do is sort of focus some of that an existing counselor's time, or at least know that, okay, Sunny is the math and English summer bridge counselor. So you might not be able to definitely get an appointment with her, but if you can, try to. And so we're not going to say that Sunny can't talk to any other student, but students know that she's their person to talk to with questions about that. So we are sort of focusing the effort to whatever this initiative is, but not saying outright, okay, you can only do this work. And the last thing I would say, and I got this advice from somebody once, is to be careful even of the word initiative, because that makes it sound like it's a special project, it's a one-off, it requires special funding, it's going to end in 5 years, so why do we even need to do this? To really just being like, this is how we are now doing business. We're going to figure out how to get the processes in place and get everything in place, but this is how we do business now. So how do we get everybody there? And I thought that was a really powerful, words matter. So I think about that a lot as we talk about how do we change our institutions to meet our students' needs.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Language matters. We see that a little bit in the juxtaposition of like, it's great. It's really important to have that proof of concept to answer questions and demonstrate value. But words like pilot can also trigger that, like, well, is this really real? Like, why are we investing in this? So just being careful about language, I agree, can be hugely meaningful. Take us home, Miko, on this one.
Oh, well, I just want to say that employers have been my best ally. The many employers have a social responsibility department. Many of them are aware that the game is changing, and you're going to see more and more partnerships between employers and universities. You're seeing this now with Coursera, with Google. So reach out. The worst that can happen, they will tell you no, but many of them are willing to have a partnership with you to help you fund a pilot, to get started. Once you have a pilot and you build some success stories, you can go for a campus-wide implementation. Employers, the government, grants, I will say those are the three things that think outside the box. Sometimes on campus, you're not finding the resources, but employers, the government, there are so many departments in the government, and the grants can help you.
Great. 3 great suggestions. I know, I don't think people often think of employers as a place to go to partner on funding some of these initiatives. That's a great suggestion. Okay, we're getting close. Oh, we're right at the top of the hour. So unfortunately, Anna, I don't think we have time for other questions. Were there any like really hot?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, terrific. Well then, thank you so much to our panelists. I just really enjoyed the conversation today. You guys gave such great ideas and advice to the audience. I highly recommend for the audience to reach out and connect with these folks on LinkedIn. They are just wonderful leaders in higher education, so great people to know. My team is going to be at OLC Accelerate in a few weeks. So if anybody's going to be in Florida, please come say hi. We have a bunch of sessions going on. We'll have a booth, but I think my LinkedIn got dropped into the chat. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to say hi in person. Should be a fun event. And if you are thinking about these initiatives on your campus, would like to learn a little bit more about how we think about it at Inscribe or get some advice from our team, just drop your name and email address in the poll here, and we will have someone follow up with you. Can be helpful to just talk about what's really specific to your institution and then be able to give a little bit more tailored advice than what we're sometimes able to provide in these webinars. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. It was so lovely to have you all. We thank you for persevering through internet and all
It's
kinds
back
of
on.
things.
I just got the email. It's back up.
Wonderful. It was maybe the good luck charm. Thank you to the audience for being here with us today. Lovely to have you all. And have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Enjoy your 70-degree weather, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.